My nephew's accidental voice memo destroyed my family, and I'm glad it did. I'm 46 years old, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. For 3 straight years, my entire extended family held reunions without me. I told myself it was just scheduling conflicts, maybe budget issues, nothing personal. I convinced myself they weren't deliberately leaving me out. But last Tuesday, everything changed. One accidental message shattered every excuse I'd been making for them. My 12-year-old nephew Tommy was supposed to send his friend a voice memo about Minecraft. Instead, he accidentally sent it to me. At first, I heard Tommy talking about some game strategy. But then I heard something in the background that made my blood run cold. My sister's voice, clear as day, saying as long as she never finds out what Mom really said, we can keep doing this. I listened to that 47-second clip 9 times. By the 3rd time, my hands were shaking. Let me give you some context. I was always close with my mom before she passed away 4 years ago. I helped pay her medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover everything. I took her to every single appointment, held her hand through the worst of it. I have 3 siblings. Linda, my older sister, who always acted like she knew what was best for everyone. Marcus, my younger brother, who went along with whatever Linda said. And Janet, the youngest, who I thought was still on my side. The family reunion started the summer after Mom's funeral. The first time I wasn't invited, Linda told me it was just a small thing, immediate family only. I believed her. I trusted her. What I didn't know was that they'd made a pact built on lies and secrets. And that pact was about to cost them everything. I called Tommy immediately. The poor kid answered on the first ring, and I could hear the panic in his voice. He was terrified, begging me not to tell his mom that he'd accidentally sent me that recording. He kept saying he was sorry, that he didn't mean to get anyone in trouble. I told him to breathe, that he wasn't in trouble, that I wasn't angry at him. But I needed to know more. I asked him what else he'd heard. There was a long pause, and then Tommy said something that made my heart sink. He told me that before the last reunion, all the adults were sitting around the kitchen table talking about keeping the secret. He didn't know what secret, but he remembered his mom, my sister Linda, saying they all had to stick to the story. That if anyone broke ranks, everything would fall apart. Tommy said he felt weird about it even then, but he was just a kid. What was he supposed to do? I promised him I'd protect him, that his name would never come up. But I needed more information. I had 2 choices: confront them directly and probably get more lies, or do what I do best. Investigate. Dig until I found the truth they were so desperate to hide. I started with social media. I went through 3 years of Facebook photos, every single post from these reunions I was never invited to. And let me tell you, these weren't small gatherings. Every reunion had 30 to 40 family members. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Distant relatives I barely remembered. Aunts and uncles who used to call me on my birthday. They were all there, every single time. Without me. I scrolled through album after album, my anger building with each smiling face. But then one photo caught my eye. It was from the reunion last summer. Everyone was gathered together for a group shot, and they were all wearing matching t-shirts. Custom-made, bright blue with white lettering. I zoomed in to read what the shirt said. Henderson Family Reunion 2023, Together in Truth. Together in Truth. I stared at those 3 words until they burned into my brain. What truth? What truth was everyone apparently united in except for me? Was this some kind of sick joke? Were they celebrating something? Some shared knowledge that I was deliberately excluded from? The more I thought about it, the more sinister it felt. This wasn't just about leaving me out. This was about something deeper, something they all knew, something about what Mom really said. Then I remembered something important. I was Mom's executor. I handled her entire estate after she died. It was a responsibility I took seriously, making sure everything was divided fairly between the 4 of us. Every asset, every bank account, every possession was split equally, down to the dollar. I'd been meticulous about it. But now, with everything that was happening, I was curious. I pulled out the estate documents I'd filed away in my home office. I started going through them page by page, looking for anything I might have missed. And that's when I found it. There was a storage unit, a small one, paid off years before Mom died. I'd completely forgotten about it. According to my notes, the unit had contained some old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes of papers and photographs. Nothing valuable. According to the records, Linda had cleaned it out with my permission about 6 months after the funeral. I stared at that line. With my permission. I racked my brain trying to remember giving Linda permission to clean out that storage unit. I couldn't remember it. Not a phone call, not a text message, not a conversation. Nothing. And more importantly, I never saw what was inside. Linda told me she'd taken care of it, that it was just junk, and I'd been so overwhelmed with grief and everything else that I'd simply trusted her. I trusted my older sister to handle it. But now I was questioning everything. What was in that storage unit? What did Linda take? And why did she need my so-called permission documented if it was really just old furniture and Christmas decorations? I called the storage facility the next morning. The woman who answered was friendly but hesitant when I explained I was calling about a unit that had been closed years ago. I told her I was the executor of my mother's estate and needed to verify some records. After some back and forth, and me providing documentation numbers, she agreed to check their old files. What she told me made my stomach drop. Yes, Linda had accessed the unit and cleaned it out. But here's what I didn't know. Linda had actually rented that same unit for 3 additional months after supposedly cleaning it out. She'd kept it active, made multiple visits. The manager put me on hold to check something, and when she came back, her tone had changed. She said she remembered my family now. Linda hadn't come alone. She'd brought Marcus and Janet with her. Multiple trips over those 3 months. The manager specifically remembered because they'd needed a dolly for some of the boxes. I asked her what kind of boxes. She said they looked like document boxes, the kind you'd store papers and files in. About a dozen of them, maybe more. Old document boxes. Not furniture. Not Christmas decorations. Documents. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I asked if she remembered anything else, anything at all. She paused, then said she remembered thinking it was odd that they seemed so serious, so secretive about the whole thing. They didn't chat or joke around like most families do. They just loaded up the boxes and left. That's when I knew. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This wasn't about them protecting me from some painful truth about my birth or my father. This was about something Mom left behind. Something in those boxes. Something my 3 siblings found and decided I should never see. Something important enough to exclude me from family gatherings for 3 years. Important enough to create matching t-shirts about truth while lying straight to my face. I didn't confront them yet. I needed leverage. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made my move. So I reached out to my Aunt Carol, my mom's younger sister. Carol had been at all the reunions. I'd seen her in dozens of those Facebook photos, smiling with everyone else. We'd always been close when I was growing up, so her participation in excluding me had stung more than most. I called her on a Wednesday afternoon and kept my tone light and casual. I told her I'd been thinking about family lately, missing everyone. Then I dropped the line I'd rehearsed. Hey, I'm planning to come to the next reunion. Where should I book a hotel? The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Aunt Carol spoke, and her voice was strained. Honey, you know you're always welcome in this family. But then she paused, and I could hear her struggling with something. But maybe you should talk to Linda first, before you make any plans. I pressed her gently. Why would I need to talk to Linda? It's a family reunion, not Linda's private party. Carol sighed, and I could tell she was torn. She loved me, I knew that. But she was also caught in the middle of something she probably never wanted to be part of. I told her I'd found out about the storage unit. I told her I knew they'd taken boxes of Mom's things without really telling me. Another long silence. Then Aunt Carol said the 6 words that changed everything. They found your mother's journals. My stomach dropped. Journals. Mom kept journals. I never knew that. In all the years I spent with her, especially those final months, she never mentioned journals. Aunt Carol's voice softened, and I could hear her moving to somewhere more private. She told me that Linda, Marcus, and Janet found Mom's journals in that storage unit. Multiple journals spanning decades. But there was one in particular, one from before I was born, that changed everything. I asked her what was in it. What could possibly be so terrible that my own siblings would cut me out of the family? Carol wouldn't say more. She kept telling me I needed to ask Linda, that it wasn't her place to get in the middle of this. But I could hear the conflict in her voice. She wanted to tell me. She was struggling with loyalty to her nieces and nephew versus loyalty to her sister's memory and to me. I pushed harder. I told her I deserved to know. That they'd stolen 3 years of family from me. That whatever was in those journals, I had a right to see them. They were part of Mom's estate, and I was the executor. Aunt Carol went quiet again, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. She said, your mom loved you more than anything in this world. Don't let them rewrite that. Don't let them twist her words into something they weren't. Then she told me she had to go, that she'd already said too much. But those words echoed in my head. More than anything. What did that mean? What was in that journal that my siblings found? And why would Aunt Carol feel the need to tell me not to let them rewrite Mom's love for me? What were they saying about Mom? What narrative had they constructed in those 3 years of reunions without me? I felt anger rising in my chest, mixing with fear and confusion. Whatever was in those journals, it was time to stop investigating in the shadows. It was time for a confrontation. I set up a three-way call with Linda, Marcus, and Janet. I recorded it, made sure everything was legal in my state. When they all got on the line, I could hear the confusion in their voices. We hadn't talked like this, all together, in years. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told them I knew about the storage unit. I knew they'd rented it for 3 months after supposedly cleaning it out. I knew they'd removed boxes of documents, Mom's personal belongings, without actually getting my permission. Linda immediately got defensive. Her voice took on that condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. She said they were protecting me, that there were things in Mom's belongings that would only hurt me, and they'd made the difficult decision as a family to spare me that pain. Marcus jumped in, backing her up like he always did. He said Mom didn't want me to know certain things, that they were honoring her wishes by keeping these secrets. Janet stayed quiet. I asked them what things. What could possibly be so devastating that it justified 3 years of lying to me, 3 years of family reunions without me, 3 years of inside jokes on matching t-shirts. Linda started to answer, giving me some rehearsed speech about family dynamics and difficult truths. That's when I interrupted her. I told them I had something I wanted them to hear, and I played Tommy's voice memo. I played my sister's voice saying, as long as she never finds out what Mom really said, we can keep doing this. The silence that followed lasted 12 seconds. I counted them. 12 seconds of dead air where nobody breathed, nobody moved. Then all 3 of them started talking at once. Linda was angry, demanding to know how I got that recording. Marcus was trying to do damage control, saying I was taking things out of context. Janet, finally, started crying. I told them to stop. Just stop. I said I knew about the journals. I knew they'd found Mom's personal writings and had decided, without me, what I should and shouldn't know about my own mother. I gave them one chance, one opportunity to come clean, show me everything, and maybe we could repair this family. Or they could keep lying, and I'd handle this another way. Janet cracked first. Through her tears, she said okay, fine, they'd tell me. They found Mom's journals in the storage unit. There were things in them, things about my birth, about the circumstances of how I came into the world. Linda immediately cut her off, her voice sharp. She said there were things that would hurt me, deeply personal things that Mom had written in private moments. They'd decided as a family to keep it private, to protect me from unnecessary pain. I pushed back. What things? What could be so terrible? I had a right to know. These were my mother's words, my history, my truth. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice quieter than Linda's but just as firm. He said I was born from an affair. That dad, the man I'd called father my entire life, wasn't my biological father. Mom had written about it in her journals, the guilt she carried, the secret she kept. They didn't want me to feel less than, to question my place in the family, to wonder if Dad had really loved me. So they destroyed the journals and agreed never to speak of it. I sat there, numb. An affair. I wasn't biologically related to the man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle at my wedding. Part of me felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. But another part of me, the part that had been investigating for days, knew something didn't add up. If they wanted to protect me, if this was really about sparing my feelings about my parentage, why exclude me from family reunions? Why continue the lie for 3 years? Why not just sit me down once, tell me this difficult truth, and then move forward as a family? And why the matching t-shirts? Why together in truth? If they'd destroyed the journals to protect me from the truth, why were they celebrating truth without me? I asked them this directly. If you were protecting me, why shut me out? Why not include me and just never mention the journals? Why make it so obvious that something was going on? The silence came back, but this time it felt different. This time it felt like I'd hit on something they hadn't prepared for. Linda started to answer, but her explanation was weak. Something about it being too painful to see me knowing what they knew. But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I demanded to see the journals. All of them. If they really wanted to be honest, if they truly cared about me knowing the truth, then show me what Mom actually wrote. Let me read her words myself instead of getting their filtered, sanitized version. Linda's response was immediate and cold. She said they'd destroyed them. All of them. It was for the best, she said. The journals served no purpose except to cause pain, so they'd made the decision to get rid of them. For the family's sake. For my sake. I felt rage building in my chest. They'd destroyed Mom's journals, her private thoughts, her life documented in her own handwriting, gone. Burned or shredded or thrown away like garbage. And they'd done it without asking me, without giving me any choice in the matter. That's when I made my move. I told them I was hiring a lawyer. Those journals were part of Mom's estate, documented property that I was responsible for as executor. They'd removed them without my consent, destroyed estate property, and had potentially violated the terms of the will. If they thought this was over, they were wrong. Marcus tried to calm things down, saying we didn't need to bring lawyers into a family matter. But I was done with their manipulation. I told them they had 48 hours. 48 hours to tell me the complete truth, the real reason they'd excluded me, or my attorney would be in touch about estate violations and possible fraud. Then I hung up. What they didn't know was that I'd already found Mom's attorney, the same man who'd helped her draft her will, who'd known her for 20 years. I'd tracked him down 2 days earlier and had an appointment scheduled for the next morning. I didn't tell my siblings that, of course. Let them think they had time to coordinate their story, to figure out damage control. Because while they were scrambling, I was about to discover that Mom had left one final truth behind, one they didn't know existed. I met with Mom's attorney the next morning. His name was Richard Pearson, a kind man in his late 60s who'd practiced estate law for 40 years. When I told him about the journals, about my siblings removing them from the storage unit and then destroying them, his face went pale. He said that was a serious matter, potentially illegal depending on how the estate was structured. But then I told him why they'd destroyed them, the story about my birth, about Dad not being my biological father. Richard leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made my heart stop. He told me there was a sealed letter in his files, a letter my mother had left with specific instructions. It was to be given to me if certain family conflicts arose after her death. Specifically, if my siblings turned against me or if there were disputes about her personal effects. I couldn't breathe. Mom had anticipated this. Somehow, she'd known. Richard stood up and went to his filing cabinet. He pulled out a manila envelope, sealed, with my name written across it in Mom's handwriting. He said Mom had given it to him about 2 months before she died, made him promise to keep it safe. I told him I needed to read it immediately. He offered me privacy, said I could use his conference room. I drove 3 hours to get to his office that morning, and now I was holding 11 pages of my mother's handwriting. My hands shook as I broke the seal. The letter began simply, "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong." As I read, Aunt Carol's words echoed in my mind. "Your mom loved you more than anything." And she did. Every word on those pages radiated her love for me. But it also revealed something else. The truth my siblings had been so desperate to hide. Yes, she wrote about my birth, about the affair. But she also explained that Dad knew from day one. He'd chosen to raise me as his own, loved me completely, never treated me as anything less than his daughter. Mom's guilt wasn't about me. It was about the affair itself, the betrayal of Dad, even though their marriage had been struggling at the time. But that wasn't the bombshell. That wasn't why my siblings had excluded me. As I turned to page 4, my hands started shaking harder. Because Mom had documented something else entirely. Mom's letter explained everything. Yes, the journals detailed the affair, her guilt, her fear that I'd discover the truth and feel unwanted. But they also detailed her fierce love for me, how Dad had embraced me as his own, how our bond was never tainted by biology. That part was painful but bearable. But then Mom's letter shifted to the real issue. The reason my siblings had actually hidden the journals from me. Over the years, Linda, Marcus, and Janet had borrowed money from Mom. Significant amounts. Linda borrowed $60,000 for her business that failed. Marcus borrowed $75,000 for his house down payment and later another $30,000 for his son's medical bills. Janet borrowed $45,000 for her divorce attorney and then another $20,000 for debt consolidation. Combined, they'd borrowed over $230,000. None of them had paid her back. Mom wrote that she documented everything, every loan, every date, every promise to repay that was never kept. She'd kept copies of checks, bank transfers, even text messages acknowledging the debts. She never told them she'd kept such detailed records. In fact, she'd planned to forgive all of it in her will. She loved her children and didn't want money to divide us after she was gone. But then something changed. 2 weeks before Mom died, she'd overheard a conversation. She was resting in her bedroom, and Linda was in the kitchen with Marcus. Linda said, and Mom quoted it directly in the letter, "Of course she's leaving everything to her favorite. The one who gets everything handed to her will be lucky to get anything once the golden child takes her cut." They were talking about me. Mom wrote that her heart broke in that moment. Not because they were ungrateful, but because they'd created a false narrative. They'd convinced themselves I was favored, that I'd manipulated her, that I'd somehow stolen what should have been theirs. The final page contained Mom's last journal entry, written just days before she passed. She wrote that if they turned on me after she was gone, Richard had instructions to ensure the truth came out. The $200,000 in documented loans would become due from their inheritance portions. Everything became clear. They weren't protecting me from painful truths about my birth. They were protecting themselves from financial accountability. When they found those journals in the storage unit, they discovered Mom's meticulous documentation of their debts. Over $200,000 they'd never have to repay if those journals disappeared. The family reunions weren't about bonding or tradition. They were strategy sessions, planning how to keep me from ever finding those journals, coordinating their story about protecting me, making sure everyone in the family understood the narrative. And the matching t-shirts, together in truth? That was a sick inside joke. They were all in on the truth, the real truth about the money, while I was kept in the dark. They were literally wearing their conspiracy on their chests. I sat in Richard's conference room, Mom's letter spread across the table, and I had a choice to make. I could let this go, preserve what was left of my family relationships, pretend I never found out. Or I could do what Mom had clearly wanted, hold them accountable. And I only had 24 hours before the next family reunion. I decided to show up at the reunion, unannounced. Richard helped me make copies of Mom's letter, enough for every adult family member who'd be there. He also prepared a legal summary of the documented loans and what they meant for the estate distribution. I drove to the reunion venue, a lakeside park they'd rented for the day. I could hear them before I saw them, laughter and music floating through the trees. When I walked into the pavilion, they were gathered for the group photo. Everyone in their matching shirts again, this year's design reading Henderson Family 2024. Stronger together. I walked right into the frame. The photographer looked confused. Linda saw me first, and the color drained from her face. Marcus actually took a step backward. Janet's smile froze. The entire family went silent, 40 people staring at me like I was a ghost. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't cause a scene. I simply started handing out the letters. To Aunt Carol first, who took it with trembling hands. Then to my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, to every adult member of my family. When I got to Linda, Marcus, and Janet, I looked each of them in the eye. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, Mom wanted you to know the truth. All of it. About the journals you destroyed. About the money you borrowed. About why I really wasn't invited. Then I handed them their copies and stepped back. The silence lasted maybe 30 seconds before chaos erupted. Aunt Carol was the first to move. She walked straight to me, tears streaming down her face, and pulled me into a tight hug. Half the family stood in shocked silence, reading Mom's words. The other half started talking all at once. Linda tried to spin it immediately, her voice loud and defensive. She said they were trying to protect the family's privacy, that this was a private matter I had no right to air publicly. But people were reading. They were seeing the numbers, the dates, the loans that were never repaid. My cousin Derek, who's an attorney, finished reading and immediately pulled me aside. He said I had clear grounds to challenge the estate distribution, that Mom's documentation was thorough enough to hold up in court. And then I felt a small hand grab mine. Tommy. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes and whispered that he was so sorry. I knelt down to his level and told him the truth. You didn't do anything wrong. You saved me. You gave me the truth when everyone else wanted to keep me in the dark. So where do things stand now? I'm pursuing legal action to recover the $200,000 on Mom's behalf. Not for me. I'm donating every penny to the hospice that cared for her in her final weeks. It's what she would have wanted. I've gone completely no contact with Linda, Marcus, and Janet. They've tried to reach out, sent emails full of excuses and half apologies, but I'm done. Half the extended family has reached out to apologize, saying they had no idea what was really happening. The other half cut me off, accused me of tearing the family apart over money. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'd rather have a smaller circle of honest people than a large family built on lies. Here's what I've realized. I spent 3 years thinking I wasn't wanted, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't good enough to be included. Turns out, I was too wanted. Wanted to stay quiet. Wanted to stay compliant. Wanted to never ask questions. Wanted to just accept whatever scraps of truth they decided to throw my way. Mom's letter ended with one line that's burned into my memory. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. She was right about that. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt excluded by family, pushed aside, made to feel like you're the problem, know this. You deserve the truth. Always. No matter how painful, no matter how complicated, You deserve to know what's really happening. Drop a comment if you want me to share what was actually in Mom's journals, the parts my siblings didn't want anyone to see. Because there's more to this story. Part 2 drops next week.